So let me start recording here, and I'm going to share my screen. All right. And we can get going here. All right. So class norms, expectations, English 1. So if it says English 1 for second period on Tuesday and Friday, then you are in the right spot. All right. With yours truly, Mr. V. Okay. If it does not say that on your roster, which I don't think it should because all of you are on my attendance list, do let me know so I can get you to the right spot. But I think everybody in here is where they should be. So that's good. All right. So as a little icebreaker to get us started, now some of you who had me last period will have already seen this. So maybe give our friends who were not here last period a chance to answer. But what I'd like to hear from you is what is one thing you can do differently in term 3 to help you be successful? So just as a little icebreaker to get us going this morning, think about, if you were here for term 2, think about how you performed and what you may want to do differently to help you perform even better, be more successful for term 3. So think about this and you can put it in the chat. You can come off mute and answer that way if you'd like. But either way, I'd like to hear from you, especially those people who I didn't see first period. So Amir, Quinshay, Tyquil, let me know what's one thing you can do differently this term to help you be successful. And while you guys are thinking, I can start us off and share mine. One thing I'm going to try to do differently this term is create better habits and routines about uh, updating assignments and what's due and stuff like that on the summit announcement page. So whether it's, setting a reminder on my phone or getting into the habit of doing it at the end of every week before I close my laptop, but in making sure that I am keeping that summit announcement page up to date, because I know that's where a lot of you all look um, when you log into Summit first thing to see kind of what's due and what's going on. So I want to try to utilize that more and more this term. That's something I didn't do last term as much that I can do differently this term. So how about all of you? Does anything come to mind? Do we have anything in the chat here? All right. Quinshay said come in every day. Awesome. Amir said waking up earlier. Both of those are great answers. Coming every day, definitely want to help with that attendance, which will help you stay on track and be caught up in what's going on. And waking up earlier, that's something that I am trying to work on as well. We talked about this a little bit last period, but I've never been a morning person. It's always been super difficult for me. I can kind of fake it, when I have to, but it's something that's super tough. That as much as I don't like it, and as hard as it is for me, I do know that it does make a whole lot of difference. And the way it was explained to me in, my previous job was, you always regret the days that you slept in too late, but you never regret the days that you woke up early. As hard as it might be, and as annoying as it might seem to get up early, we never wake up early and think, "Oh, I wish I would have slept in a little bit today because, um, you know, I got so much stuff done." That's never. It's always like, "Oh wow, I'm glad I got up early because I was able to get all these things done today." Whereas when we sleep in late, usually it's the opposite. And we say, "Oh, I wish I would have got up an hour or two earlier, so then I would have been able to get X, Y, and Z done." So that's huge. And again, when we talk about goals, part of what goes into it is forming those habits, right? So if we make getting up earlier a habit, then the other stuff will take care of itself, like coming to class, having time to do work, all those things. So thank you to Quinshay and Amir for sharing, right? Anybody else? Check the chat one more time. Sammy said paying attention. Very, very specific. I like it. Make sure you're staying engaged. Tyquil, staying on track with assignments. Monica said set reminders when I'm supposed to get on class. I really like that one. That's really cool. I have reminders on my phone for when I'm supposed to start the Summit Lab, for when I'm supposed to put grades in, all those things. I'm always setting reminders on my phone because I don't like to write a lot of stuff down. We have like a calendar on our fridge, but that's just kind of general. But I've never been a big planner book person, so I like to do it all on my phone because I can get notifications and it's right there. Um, but if you're somebody who planning and having like a book works for you, then go for it. But those are all really, really good ones. And Sammy said I get distracted easily. That's why I have that as a goal. But that is totally fine. It is tough to do this virtual stuff. I'm not going to lie to you. As tough as it is for you guys to stay engaged as learners, it's just about equally as tough, for me to stay engaged as a teacher. Because I'm teaching from my living room, so it can be hard to stay motivated and come up with an exciting lesson and do making sure we're doing a bunch of different things. But I know I have to be, um, you know, I have to work hard because it's not fair to you guys, and your goal is all to graduate, so I got to do my part. So don't be ashamed to have that as a goal. So think of what are the little things you can do to help yourself get there. Can you put a sticky note on your laptop to remind you, like, hey, are you paying attention right now? Can you do class in a different room of your house so it's a better kind of environment, so you're not like still in your bedroom where you're prone to like go back to sleep or whatever it might be. um, you know don't discount. That's something I think a lot of people don't think matters as much, but it's can be super huge. It's just changing your environment, right? So if you want to be more focused, find a spot in your house, or wherever you're at, where you're not going to be as easily distracted because there's a TV or there's an Xbox or a PlayStation or your bed is there and you can lay down or things like that. When those stimuli aren't there, then we can focus on the other stuff. So environment is huge too, that kind of stuff. But really, really good stuff. I love all of the engagement so far. Thank you guys. Good job. All right. So I would like you all to keep those in mind as we move forward in this term. And hopefully we will be able to accomplish a lot of those goals. All right. So with that being said, let's dig into what we are indeed going to be doing for this term. All right. So most of you have seen these before. We have one or two new people with us, so I just want to go over everything again at the start of every term, just to start fresh. But as always, remember to check your Yes Philly email daily. That's where all the key stuff and links and things like that are going to come. Try and check it twice if you can, once in the morning, once at night. Mute yourself when you're not speaking. You guys already know all this stuff. We've been doing it for a minute now. So you guys are good. If your camera's on, make sure you look appropriate because this is still a school setting technically. And with that, make sure we're also using the appropriate language. And my pen's getting stuck in my sweater here. And if you have any tech issues, make sure you're contacting Miss C. Her email is right there. Specifically, if you're having issues with Summit or your Yes Philly email, she would be the one to reach out to. Okay. But again, I think most of you have been here for a bit, so you should be okay with that. All right. All right. So those are our virtual norms in general. As far as this class specifically, attendance is big. Some of us have already mentioned that, and what we want to do differently this term, and we want to come every day. So please do try to log in every day. Just like if we were in the building, you would have to physically come into the building. Excuse me. To get credit, we want you to physically log in to class. All right. Because number one, we just want to see and hear from all of you. Number two, it helps you stay on top of what's going on in class so you know what to do, what's assigned, and that way you don't make more work for yourself than you have to by, okay, I haven't gone to class, I'm just going to do everything that's on Summit. Well, maybe some of that's on Summit you don't have to do. but we don't know that unless we are in class, and hearing what's going on. So make sure you're in class every day. The other part is that attendance is a big part of our grade now, 40%. All right, and that includes coming and participating. Right, that is kind of a big thing we saw last term a couple times, is people showing up, but then we don't hear from them. Okay, we go silent. Right, so I have to know that you are still there and not just logging into class and then going back to sleep or leaving and having your computer on, whatever it is, because then you're not really in class, right? So it's not 100% fair to give you credit for attending, to give you the same credit, I should say, as somebody who is coming to class and is engaging and talking the whole time. So attendance also includes participation in there. Also have our final product, which is another 40%, and then the last 20% is checkpoints, any quizzes that we take. So again, making sure all your checkpoints are green or yellow by the end of the term. That's going to be big. I'm going to make sure I edit the Summit project accordingly now that we have kind of 2 virtual terms under our belt and I know what works well and what doesn't work well. I'll try to make sure our checkpoints are as streamlined as possible so that everybody can get them done, right? And last but not least, as always in my classes, if you have me before, discussion is encouraged. We're already off to a great start. I love seeing everybody's answers in the chat. Okay. A lot of my classes have to do with discussion, talking about what we're reading, what we're writing about, things like that. Of course, I know when we're in the building, it's a little bit easier because we're in person, but we're still able to do that, whether it's with the chat or, coming off mute. So, the more that you do, the more we'll get out of this class. So I always say, help me, help you. This class can be as engaging and exciting as we all allow it to be. If everybody's into it and responding, then it'll go by like that. If nobody is talking and I have to pull out answers, then it will be slow and painful, which nobody wants. So that you guys are kind of the pulse with that. So keep it up. You guys are already, like I said, off to a good start. All right. Questions with any of that so far? Check the chat here real quick. No? Everybody's good. Right, awesome. So then let's dive into this project, this course in general. When my PowerPoint decides to work again, sorry. There we go. All right. So here is a thought for the day to get us get our brains in gear with what we're going to be learning about. So this is what I want you to think about for the next minute or two. What is the difference between fiction and nonfiction? And is one more useful than the other? Okay. Like I said, take a minute or two, think about that. And I want you to respond in the chat if you can. If you want to respond over your mic, you can do that too. But I'd like to see at least 2 or 3 different responses to this. So tell me, what's the difference between fiction and nonfiction, which we should all know, and do you think one is more useful than the other? All right. So I'll leave this up here for a few minutes. Tell me what you think in the chat.
One is real, one is fake.
Definitely. Can you tell me which one is which? Like which one's the real one, which one's the fake one?
Nonfiction is the fake one, I think.
Yes, you are correct, Monica. Thank you. Let me check the chat as well. All right. Yeah. So Amir said same thing. One is real, one is not. So we know fiction is made up. Nonfiction is based on stuff that actually happened, based on facts, usually. Right. That's what we're going to kind of talk about in this project. So what do we think for the second part of that question? Then, do we think one is more useful than the other? Do we get more use out of fiction versus nonfiction? Do we get more use out of nonfiction versus fiction? Are they both kind of the same? What do you think?
I feel like fiction is more important because the the real is always better than the fake.
So you said, so you think fiction is more important or nonfiction is more important?
Fiction.
Fiction is more important. But okay, I just wanted to clarify because I thought I heard you then say the real is always better than the fake. So if that's the case, wouldn't nonfiction be more important?
Yes, that's what I mean.
Okay, no worries. That's really good. That's a really good point. All right. Real is always better than fake, especially when it comes to, you know, getting correct information, and stuff like that. So Monica says nonfiction, more useful than fiction. Does anybody agree? Does anybody think something different, that we can respond to either in the chat or coming off mute? You think anybody with a different opinion who thinks maybe fiction is more useful than nonfiction? Quinchay agrees with Monica. Awesome. Here's another way to think about this. That kind of I thought about it at first. I do agree with Monica and Quinchay that we should always value what's real over what's fake. But the other way to think about it is from an emotional perspective, right? A lot of us enjoy stories and reading, whether it's reading a book, watching a movie, whatever it is. And a lot of our favorite stories are fiction. When you think about, Harry Potter or The Hunger Games, or like The Maze Runner, some of our favorite movies, like, my first period, we were talking about our favorite movies, last class, right? So like a lot of those are fiction. They might be inspired by stuff that actually happened, but the story itself and the characters are made up. And I think about how important those are and how much we enjoy those. Like, I'm a big Harry Potter fan. My girlfriend is an even bigger Harry Potter fan. So some people might say fiction is more useful than nonfiction in that regard, in that fiction allows us to create stories, movies, TV shows that are entertaining, that we enjoy, that connect with our emotions, that we maybe aren't able to do if we just stick to nonfiction stuff. What do you guys think? Do you guys agree with that? Do you still think nonfiction is better? You guys see what I'm getting at here? Monica agrees. Yeah, awesome. Thank you. That is the other, that's the other side of this, right? Is I think when we're talking about when we want to learn something, right? When we want to learn something, when we are watching the news or reading an article, which one of those is probably better, fiction or nonfiction? When we want to learn, about what's going on somewhere, which of those is going to be better in that instance? What do we think? Fiction or nonfiction is going to be better when we want to kind of learn about what's happening, either locally, nationally, you know, nonfiction, right, Monica? So when we want to learn, the facts about something, we want nonfiction. If we want to be entertained, if we want a story, some people might argue that fiction is better because we can create these kind of made up characters, made up worlds like Harry Potter, Lord of the Rings, Hunger Games, whatever it might be. Now, others would argue that, like nonfiction, like biographies, autobiographies, documentaries, um, those are just as entertaining. um, like there's a lot of true crime documentaries, how To Catch a Killer, all that kind of stuff. That's really big. That's a really big trend right now, right? So fans of that stuff might argue, well, like, no, that's all nonfiction and it's just as entertaining. So that's the great thing, is this is up to interpretation. But I think when we think about it in those two different ways, we can kind of see what we mean here. So the reason we are, and thank you to everybody who shared, great job. The reason we're talking about that kind of stuff today is because that is what's going to be the crux of this project. The project is going to be called Fact or Fiction, and what we're going to be doing is a textual analysis, right? So we're going to be looking at different kind of articles, different kind of reports, and you can see from our essential questions, we're going to talk about what are the similarities and differences in what we can learn from fiction or nonfiction. So can we learn stuff from both? What can we learn that's similar? What can we learn that's different? And what is the value of having different types of texts, such as fiction and nonfiction? And that's what we kind of already talked about a little bit. Fiction can be entertaining. We can come up with stories. Nonfiction can help us get the facts, and learn what we need to do. And then we'll also dive into, fact checking stuff, which is, something that's super crucial, in the times we live in right now, where we are inundated, which means we have a lot of different news feeds and, information and stuff that's always happening. So we'll try to figure out, like, okay, is this a fact? Is it not? How can we tell? Is there bias in this? Does that make it less of a fact? Things of that nature. All right. Which is eventually going to lead us to our final project goal. Now, I know this is a lot, so we'll kind of break it down here. But what we're going to do for our final project says, based on the learning you did through this project, identify an argumentative claim about what types of reading are most important to your education and how much fiction and nonfiction should be taught in schools. So what that first part is saying is basically we're going to decide, based on everything we learn and talk about in this project, which one of these is more useful to learn in school, fiction or nonfiction. And we're going to find an argumentative claim, like it says right here, meaning, a claim that makes an argument one way or the other, about which type is the most important, and how much it should be taught in schools. So maybe you'll find an article, maybe you'll find a story written in a newspaper, an essay somebody wrote that argues, we should teach more fiction than nonfiction in schools, or you might find the opposite. All right. Once you do that and you kind of analyze that, what you're going to do is then select a leader in the education world, a principal, a CEO of an organization, or of an education organization, or perhaps a government official like a senator or secretary of education. So you can write to Dr. Dave at Yes Philly. You can write to Dr. Height, the superintendent of the school district. You can write to the new Secretary of Education that just took over. You can write to our local senator, whatever you want to do, and you can write an actual letter. I'd like these to be actual letters, because I'd like to send some of them out for real, if I can. I think that'd be really great to do, and write a formal letter expressing your argumentative claim, and offering an action you would like to see the recipient take to improve education for you and other students. So, and we're going to learn how to do all of this. But in your letter, you're going to state your argument. This is why I think we should teach more fiction than nonfiction. Here's evidence that proves my point. And because of all this, this is what I think, we should start doing in schools in Philly. All right, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Right. So that's kind of what our final project is going to be. And like I said, we're going to learn and talk about how to do all those kinds of things, right? And that's what I'm going to be looking for, right? And it's just going to be this one final product, all right? Like I've said before, we have kind of two virtual terms under our belt so far, so I know kind of what has worked, what hasn't worked. So I want to make sure these projects are as streamlined as possible, easy for people to stay on top of, easy for people to get caught up in if we fall behind, because we know all of the challenges with this virtual stuff. All right. So any questions with that so far? Questions on the project, on what we're going to be doing? Anything at all? All right, awesome. So then to kind of start to wrap up today, because like I said, not a whole lot going on this morning. So this is just the first day. All right. I want us to start thinking about these essential questions now that we know kind of what we're going to be looking for in this project. All right. So I want us to think about, for today, this second essential question here to kind of get our brains, in gear. And this is something we've already kind of talked about a little bit this morning already, but I'm going to put it in the chat, and I'd like to hear from some different people, especially people we haven't heard from yet this morning, if we can. But what is the value of having different types of text, such as fiction and nonfiction, right? So you can think specifically about, when it comes to, being in school and the stuff we read in school and in class, right? What is the value of having both kinds, fiction and nonfiction? Do you think there is a value? All right. Why or why not? All right. So take a few minutes, and I'd like to see maybe 2 or 3 responses to this question in the chat if you can. If you want to come off mute and answer over your mic, that's fine too. But what do we think about this? What is the value of having different types of text, such as fiction and nonfiction? Right. In other words, what do we get out of having different types of text as opposed to maybe only having one? If we only did nonfiction stuff, or if we only did fiction stuff, what would be the difference? That's how we determine the value.
I feel like it's good to have both because you can learn facts about the world, and then you can also like get to read stuff that's not real, like fairy tale and stuff and romance.
Yeah, that's awesome, Monica. I totally agree. I think we already kind of said, each one kind of can serve its own unique purpose. The nonfiction can help us learn the facts. The fiction can help us, read some of the stuff that maybe might be not more enjoyable, but a little bit more entertaining or more creative. So that's really good. Any other thoughts? So that's one value, is that we can have, we can accomplish those 2 different types of things. Any other thoughts on this? Do we think that that one influences the other? That the value of having both of them is that, they can kind of build off of each other? Do we think that is the case at all, or no? What do we think? Think about stories you've read, like that we call historical fiction, or things like that. Like if you had me for class when we read that book, Dear Martin, right? That is a fictional story, but it's based on, Martin Luther King Jr.'s influence, who's a real person. So I think, that's one of the values that I think we have, is that the value of having different types of text is that they can play off of one another, and the nonfiction can influence the fiction, and we can have fictional stories based on real people, real places, real events, um, things like that. What do you guys think? Do you guys agree? Do you think something different? Let me know in the chat or off mute. All right, we've heard from Monica already a bunch. We've heard from Amir a little bit, so I'd love to hear from maybe Sammy, Tyquil, Ambria, anybody else who has a thought. What do you guys think? Do you agree that they can both play off of each other, and then we can get more out of what we read because one can influence the other? Do we think there's value? Do we think there's value in that versus if we only had fiction or if we only had nonfiction? We wouldn't be able to do that. Any other thoughts? When you think about the things you've read in school you enjoyed the most, were they fiction? Were they nonfiction? That's another way to kind of think about this too. And if it was fiction, um, does that mean we should be including more fiction in what we teach? If it was nonfiction, does it mean we should include more of that? Should we keep them both? Any other thoughts here for this question before we wrap up today? I'd like to see if we can get at least one more response in the chat before we wrap up. So I know you guys are still alive out there. Are we stumped? Are we worn out? Are we still getting our brains back in school mode? That's okay. All right. Just something to continue to think about. All right. As we begin this project is, what is the value? How, what do we get out of having both kinds of, or different kinds of texts, as opposed to having just one or the other, right? Something to keep in mind as we move through here. All right. So, ladies and gents, if there are no other questions about anything, that is where we can wrap it up today. A little bit early, which is awesome. Like I said, first day is always kind of a little low key. Let us get back into the swing of things, and then we will dive into it when we meet again on Friday. Okay. So we will meet again next time on Friday. So I will see all of you again then. If some of you are my mentees, I will see you all tomorrow, because don't forget tomorrow is Wednesday. And remember, We're going to be changing up Wednesdays now. So just like we did yesterday, we're going to start by all going to the same Zoom link, one big room for everybody, and then we're going to break out into other breakout rooms with your mentors from there. Okay. So just keep that in mind. You should get an email with the link to that room in your guest feeling email either today or tomorrow morning. And then we will see you there at 9 o'clock. All right. If you have no questions for me, you are good to go for today.